Welcome to the debate. I'm your host Sana Makbool with you at B2B World. In today's show, we will be taking a look at the recent heart-to-heart conversation in an interview with the PMLN Premier, the NAWAZ Sharif, who's of course spoken with regards to various tribulations and trials that his family has undergone over the course of the past 5 years. And after a long time, he's appeared and addressed the public and talked about his entire struggle for the past 5 years and what all he and his family had to go through. And in this heart-to-heart conversation, in the interview that NAWAZ Sharif gave, he spoke about many cases and many things that he and his family had to go through, including detailed conversations with regards to his wife's passing away, the way his children dealt with the loss, the way there was a lot of things going on in terms of the cases and the political vendetta that he talks about at home, and how he and his family had to suffer through all of that, along with the pain and trauma of losing a loved one in their lives. Along with that, NAWAZ Sharif also spoke about many other things regarding various measures of accountability that need to be questioned, especially in terms of the years that he has lost and in terms of the court appearances and the struggle that he and his family has to go through, after which we now see that in one of the cases, Maryam Nawaz has come out successfully, and because of that there was a lot of question in terms of why this entire decision was taken in a haste, and how perhaps a lot of the other cases as well are put to question, and there have been serious repercussions for the family who has had to go through all of these issues without anything at fault. So this discussion coming in from NAWAZ Sharif is important, especially in terms of the context that he puts in with what the former Premier NAWAZ Sharif made the country go through, especially in terms of his focus on the opposition parties, the then opposition parties, including the PMLN and the PPP, and the political vendetta that was carried out. And then also, of course, in terms of how the country and the nation in general also suffered because of that. We're going to be talking in detail regarding the questions that have been put forth by NAWAZ Sharif, and also in terms of the discussion regarding the political evolution and the way forward in terms of the involvement of both NAWAZ Sharif and Maryam Nawaz in the political arena. As a response to this interview, the PTI leader Fawad Chaudhry has spoken about how this was in fact a charge sheet, and the real people that NAWAZ Sharif seems to be pointing fingers at are the institutions, including the courts and the army. This is of course that has come in from the PTI, so we'll take that into context as well and try to understand what really is going on, especially in terms of what now is also being talked about from both NAWAZ Sharif and the PMLN, that whatever aspects of the former Premier's government and time in power were, as a consequence, of course, the entire nation suffered, but also in terms of what was carried out is now coming to light as to who he really was, or what he really aspired to be, and what sort of measures were taken in his own political interests, irrespective of the nation's political interests. So that is going to be our focus of the show today, and we're going to try and take a closer look at what NAWAZ Sharif spoke about in this interview, and then also try to understand in general what he also mentions, that politics aside, there should be no cruelty on a person, especially in the name of political games. For this and more, as usual, of course, I've been joined in the studios by senior analyst Raja Faisal, and we've been joined by our friend and senior analyst Farooq Badafi, all the way from Gwadar, who's joined us online. Thank you, Farooq, for taking the time out. We've also been joined by our guests online, Barrister Asad Rahim, who's a political analyst and legal expert, and Mr. Rana Makbool Ahmed, Senator, PMLN. Let me start with you, Farooq. When we take a look at this entire situation, of course, the entire narrative that has come out from NAWAZ Sharif had been missing from quite some time. He hasn't spoken in such detailed or in such private conversations with regards to what his family or he had to go through and what he had to experience. Considering all of that, what was said, and in terms of taking a look at the kind of turmoil that perhaps political leaders in our country have to go through at the hands of the political vendetta, or the kind of political games that are being played, is of course puts all of this into question and gives us a context or perspective as to the kind of suffering that perhaps other political leaderships and political parties have gone through. What do you make of this conversation, first of all, and then the kind of impact that that's going to play in the way PMLN is now going to be proceeding forward with his involvement in politics?
I hope you can hear me comfortably. First of all, a correction. I told the producers, but I think it was not conveyed. I am in Karachi right now, on the way to Gwadar, but at this moment I'm in Karachi. Regarding this press conference, I think that I think it was a master stroke when you talk about PMLN's political strategy. Remember that the day when Imran Khan actually waved that letter in a public rally, that was a moment, an important moment. Similarly, vote of no confidence, the day that happened, that was also a moment. Like all of that, this one, where NAWAZ Sharif is directly talking to press, directly talking to the media, and he is actually discussing what he had to actually endure, was a masterstroke because it was a human interest story, and I think that whosoever has been following news must be really moved by this. And that's why I think that it was a very smart decision to make him talk to the media. By the way, another very important thing that during Imran Khan Saab's time, when he was Prime Minister, NAWAZ Sharif's appearance on television was banned. So there seems to be a welcome development where that ban is also lifted. Now the contents of what NAWAZ Sharif was saying, I think that in the past also I've told you that Kulsum Nawaz's death, and she was the former First Lady, wife of NAWAZ Sharif. That was a very sad moment personally for me as well, and I'm sure that anybody who knew her, they were saddened by that occasion as well. And there is a particular context here. She was on her deathbed, and at that time, NAWAZ Sharif and his daughter were expected to come to the courts and surrender themselves before the law. While this situation was going on, there was a possibility, because they were abroad and they were coming back voluntarily. Pakistan doesn't have any extradition law treaty with UK. So when they were coming here, there could have been some relaxation that, okay, take care of your family first and then come back. And because of the way hastily, the way it was handled, there are many questions that are raised. Why was it done in such a haste when a person is coming independently of his own volition to surrender before law? And secondly, if that was really that important an issue, why was he allowed to go back? And why is it that today he can appear on television, right? So you have to actually reconcile all these realities, and I think that PMLN has benefited from that interaction, because that was a really moving story and a sad one too.
Absolutely. Rana Saab, let me come to you. When we take a look at this entire conversation, there are, of course, a lot of stories that NAWAZ Sharif has shared. But there's obviously a lot of criticism or a lot of concerns in terms of who needs to be held accountable. And it's not perhaps just the former Premier Imran Khan that he seems to be pointing towards. When you take a look at the entire conversation, what do you think really is all of this pointing towards in terms of all the woes that NAWAZ Sharif is sharing? Who is he really concerned with, or which part of the entire conversation do you think holds more significance than the other? Rana Sahab, can you hear me? Unfortunately, I think we have lost our contact with Rana Sahab. But let me come to you, Asad. When we take a look at the kind of conversation that... all right, Rana Sahab, you can carry on.
I can speak on this now. No, I can.
Okay.
It's I'm very, very sorry. There was a lot of distortion and disruption. I couldn't
No problem.
follow each word properly. But all the same, what I could make out from your dispensation on this issue, who should be held accountable and responsible? Perhaps this was your question.
Yes, who do
Uh,
you think Mr. Nawaz Sharif seems to be most hurt by, or feels that has done him the most damage?
Yes, I personally think a commission is to be constituted to determine the responsibility, whosoever is responsible for this predicament of Mia Nawaz Sharif and his family. Unfortunately, the decision which was made by the verdict given by Honorable Supreme Court was almost identical as it was given by Justice Munir Ahmed regarding Maulvi Tumizuddin case, and Justice Sheikh in case of the judicial murder execution of Bhutto, and Justice Rashad Hassan Khan's verdict giving full powers to a military dictator for amending the constitution. There are a lot many things common, blatant violation of law and rules and principles of justice, unfortunately. To begin with, the way he was tried in the Supreme Court straight away, and look at the gravity and the seriousness of the charge. You haven't received 10,000 dirham from your son, and you did not declare. It was your asset, therefore you are disqualified for life. So could there be anything more objectionable than this, unfortunately, than giving the direction down the line that 3 references should be filed against Mia Nawaz Sharif. He should be tried thrice in the same charge of corruption and corrupt practice and having asset beyond known means. It was the same charge, but he was tried thrice for the same charge and the way he was convicted. I was so shocked to read the judgment of the trial judge, Mr. Bashir. He writes in his judgment at page 172, para 2, saying that there is no incriminating evidence against Muhammad Nawaz Sharif and Maryam Nawaz, and they are not found guilty of corruption and corrupt practices under Accountability Ordinance 9 and 5. Therefore, they are acquitted. This is the order of the court.
Yeah.
And in the following paras later on, he was convicted. You can very well understand the logic and the circumstances under these conditions. A leader, a prime minister who was doing so well for the welfare of the country and the people, he was convicted and written off from the page of politics. No, who is responsible for that, for such things? And if you go through the judgment of Justice Atar Manilla, who gave bail to Mia Muhammad Nawaz Sharif and his daughter, he says, I fail to understand what type of order is it? The trial judge says that they are acquitted. How can he convict them? Exactly. So you can understand what are the factors behind that. All these reasons which are responsible for that, and people who have been sponsoring such reason to convict a prime minister, they need to be exposed through an impartial inquiry at all levels.
We need to expose them, and we need to expose them. And of course, I'll go towards obviously Asad. Asad has been following this case throughout, and Asad, we have an equation here. Of course, Rana Saab has demanded. He is talking about, there should be a commission that needs to be constituted. Obviously, the debate should be on. Obviously, if we talk about Nawaz Sharif Saab, he has raised questions on the trial itself. Do you think that this commission needs to be obviously working on it? And if we talk about what to work, can we say that joint investigation team, JIT, which was formed to bring forth the evidences in these cases, do you think that they will be probed, number one, and number two, the trial itself should be probed as well?
Thank you, Raja Saab. Commissions of inquiry pertaining to judgments, no matter how erroneous, would bring the entire judicial system to a standstill. That's why we have the function of an appeal. You appeal to identify the defect on the surface of the record. That is what Mia Saab and his relations have done, and that is why they are being acquitted. I agree with Rana Saab. If one is to read the trial judgment pertaining to the Avonfield Apartments case, it's poorly written. The reasoning is circular. It contradicts itself in various areas, and the Islamabad High Court, in their suspension of sentence order, have listed those contradictions and those discrepancies adequately. So now that we've reached the stage of acquittal, we should await what the detailed reasons hold, and I dare say that many of the defects that we saw in the trial judgment will be brought to light and be corrected. That's what we have an appeal for. And whereas I would also again agree with Rana Saab that we've had a long and checkered judicial history from Justice Munir all the way to the Zafar Ali Shah case in 2000, in which we are validating constitutional deviations one after the other. This case is somewhat different. You have a family that has been involved in politics and business for 3 decades. They have made completely different representations pertaining to a very simple question. And we get into fonts, and we get into evidence, and we get into all sorts of legal technicalities. The question is, who owns Avonfield Apartments? Nobody has been able to adequately answer this through an actual paper trail, through documentary evidence. One relation said that it is on rent. One relation said, I don't own it. The other relation said, I'm a trustee, not a beneficial owner. The fourth relation said, no, they are a beneficial owner and not a trustee. And first you went to Parliament. As a Prime Minister, you went to Parliament and said that you went to Dubai, from which you then set up a business in Jeddah, from which then you bought the flats in London. Then when you came to the court, you said that was a political statement. You forgot entirely about Jeddah, and you said that you actually invested with the royal family in Qatar. And then you brought out a letter saying that this was actually part of a larger Qatari investment project. These were contradictions upon contradictions, and if you will read Justice Asif Khosa's judgment of April 20th, in which he did not say that a JIT should be constituted, he decided to disqualify Mia Saab in the first series of judgments. You can see it is clear from there also that not a single piece of evidence was brought forward by the Prime Minister or by the other respondents to be able to justify either their ownership or their link to these apartments. And it is insulting, if you don't mind my saying, to pretend that these flats exist in some sort of a vacuum where nobody can be brought forward when you are congratulating people in this country regarding these judgments while sitting in those same flats. So we can talk about legalities, we can talk about the optics of the matter all day long, but the issue is something that goes beyond certain provisions. It is about, were you able to conceptually satisfy the court of public opinion as regards these apartments? And it's a very simple question. So while agreeing that the Avonfield trial judgment was incredibly defective, and we will see in the detailed reasoning what the Islamabad High Court says, it remains, I think, a mystery that a family this well documented has not been able to answer
that's
such
an
a basic
important question that I would like Mr. Rana Saab to also answer. But I have another one for you before we go. That there's a question that NAWAZ Sharif also asked in terms of what has happened or what his family had to go through, is that there have been numerous court appearances, 200 to 250 is what he is being quoted as saying, and then of course added to that the fact that the kind of turmoil that the family had to go through or the number of years that they have lost. Is this something that can be answered when he asks who's accountable for that, or what sort of compensation exists for that, or if anything can be made of that?
Well, I think one would have to be very, very capricious and I think very unemotional to watch that interview and not sympathize when Mia Saab said that all she wanted was a furlough to be able to be with the former First Lady when she was incredibly unwell, and she passed away shortly after. So, but that process, I would also say, has to do with certain responsibilities that our own elected executives have. The National Accountability Bureau was built on the ruins of the Ehtisab Bureau under Mr. Saifur Rahman. Mia Saab was in power for very many years during the 90s, and then later on between 2013 to 2017, after which Mr. Abbasi took over. The onus to reform the accountability superstructure was on them. We did not see that happening. We saw it being used as a tool for political victimization. Much of this has been amply demonstrated in the Khwaja Salman Rafiq Saab judgment. Once you put in an instrument like this, the onus remains on you to reform it. To now turn around and say that people must be held accountable, we have seen post vote of no confidence and post this coalition forming government again, that there is no emphasis on accountability. The emphasis is on business as usual. If we are to put in structural reforms, well, let's start that conversation. Right now, it seems that we're just repeating the same cycle we saw in the early to mid-90s.
Right. Rana Saab, when you take a look at what Asad has spoken about, especially in terms of the kind of weightage or impact that the court of public opinion has, I mean, it's one thing when we talk about the legal aspects of what everything has gone through, but there's obviously, of course, the way that the political narrative or the cases have shaped public opinion as well. What has the PMLN done to be able to counter that, or to be able to satisfy the public at large as to the cases being part of a political vendetta or not something in which Nawaz Sharif or his family was responsible? Yes, Rana Saab, can you hear me? Can you please unmute yourself? Rana Saab, you'll have to unmute yourself before you speak. I still can't hear you, so you'll have to unmute yourself. All right, Rana Saab, we can't hear you, so I'm going to try and come back to you. I think there's some problem with the mute button. You could try doing something with that. But let me come to you, Farooq, and before I ask you the question, I'd like to also compliment earlier. I think something went wrong with the light perhaps, and you look like Phantom of the Opera or out of a movie scene from The Godfather. So that looked pretty cool. You would have liked it if you saw it yourself. When we take a look at the entire conversation that has happened, and then of course the discussion so far, it seems of course that there's a lot more in terms of the responsibility or accountability that also exists on the shoulders of the PMLN itself as well. And there's of course a lot of that stuff that has been said or spoken with regard to the cases or regards to the previous Prime Minister and the leadership of PTI. But when it comes to the PMLN, as you earlier were saying, it's a masterstroke. Isn't there also a lot of responsibility or accountability in terms of actually talking about the nuances of these cases and making them clear to the public?
Right, Sana, and thank you very much for that comment. I could also see that I was actually looking girlish at that time, but electricity is electricity. It went out, and then one had to actually take care of it. But regarding what you were saying earlier, and I have to actually respond to something that was Asad, that was said by Asad also. Asad was talking about one simple question: who owns the property? I totally agree with this question, and I think it should be clearly answered. But is it something that is too pressing that you set aside everything else in the country and just follow up on this? My concern is that the whole thing actually, this question arose from Panama Papers, which essentially was a stolen, bunch of data that surfaced, and then of course we started taking the initiative. Then that evidence, it is stolen evidence. I don't know what law says. I think Asad can tell me. But then, the Honorable Court actually takes it up. Then it forms a GIT, which was again very unique thing to do. and then that JIT actually pursues the matter, and then it goes to a trial court, and then a supervisory judge is actually designated who is going to supervise another judge, and then that judge is supposed to actually give the verdict. My only concern at this moment is that whether we like it or not, and I'm sure that Honorable the judiciary will not agree with this, but when it comes to punters and pundits, they will see essentially that there was something related to political contingencies and urgencies that actually kept on accelerating this. Otherwise, so many new precedents were unheard of in any other case, right? So it is very important to actually remember that while this question needed to be answered, it wasn't that urgent an issue that you suspend all disbelief, you suspend everything else. And every person seems to be running around actually trying to fix this issue. And then in the end, of course, when it came to declaration, lack of declaration can disqualify you for some time. But lifetime, disqualification, as we have heard from the Honorable Chief Justice of Pakistan, that lifetime, disqualification actually sounds draconian in nature. So my question is, between that time when this verdict was given, when this entire inquiry was being instituted, when this entire process was taking place, and today what has changed? And if that has changed and there is realization that today lifetime disqualification is not a good answer, so why should it not be applied to the previous judgment as well? Why shouldn't we actually be asking this? And I totally get it. Sharif family needs to answer whatever they're asked, and they have to actually address this issue. But honestly, let's face it, that there was a broader political context in those days as well, and somehow it seems to have changed today. I'm not that much concerned what happened at that time, whether it was correct or not. I'm not honorable justice, I'm not judiciary. My concern is that then it should have been sustained. The same value system would have been actually carried forward to this day. It doesn't seem to be carried forward. What has changed and who's going to answer this? Is it not important?
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I'll go towards Rana Saab with your permission, Sana. Rana Saab, are you with us, sir?
Yes,
Can
no,
we hear
I'm
you now?
with you.
Excellent,
yes, I can
sir.
hear you now.
Rana Saab, would you agree to this, that this presser was a message for the followers of PMLN and especially obviously for the people of Pakistan? What Mia Nawaz Sharif Saab has done is he has told people across Pakistan the sufferings he has gone through, number one, and obviously his family has gone through in last 5-6 years, number one. And number two, he himself mentioned while addressing to the nation, he said that the political victimization he has faced and his family has faced, it was unprecedented. Would you agree, sir, number one? And number two, can this be the narrative for the PMLN to go forward with its politics in the future? And as Sana earlier asked you about, how would it be delivered to the people, and do you have some kind of plan to go on the grassroots level and tell to the people what has actually happened in last 6 years, sir?
Because Rana Sahab, at the end of the day, there is of course the legalities that we can talk about, but it's a different matter when it comes to the courts of public opinion. There may be still people who are thinking that the kind of decisions that are coming out now are a result of the fact that this political leadership is sitting in power at the moment.
As far as Rana Saab's question is concerned, Raja Saab, I personally think this is the responsibility of the Muslim League and leadership to really disseminate total information about the predicaments and suffering they underwent. And I tell you, it's so shameful that all daughters are daughters of everybody, the way she was treated. One can't even describe that time and again. She was put in the death cell, even in Lahore. Her medicine was stopped. She was given only one chapai. There was nobody to talk to her. She was not given food from her, and she was not well. So it was an extreme level of maltreatment. It was a very atrocious behavior. And you, under whose instruction? You know that. It's the same premier who went abroad and made his speech in America. Once I go back, I'll take away their beds and their ACs and other facilities. And look at the mind and look at the intention. How do they react with full vengeance to their opponents? Not only this, Mian Nawaz Sharif was in prison, and he was again taken on remand, and he was taken to this accountability premises, and he was confined there. His medicine was stopped, and his food was not given properly. Therefore, his health degenerated within days, and you saw the consequences of that. And not to say the least, the day he was sitting in the prison, and he received his daughter who came for a visit to him, and he has narrated the story. What would happen to a father and other relations when his or her daughter is taken away like this in a barbarian act, and she is taken away in the prison in his presence? Was it required under law? What morality and ethics of justice justify this ruthless act? Shouldn't they be prosecuted and taken to task? My friend, barrister, has been saying that they couldn't rectify law. Okay, does it justify? If the law was not rectified, then these atrocities should be perpetrated on their opponents. Was it justified? So therefore, no doubt there are human inadequacies. There are a lot of inadequacies in the politicians, in their decision making. There are a lot of inadequacies, but it does not mean they should be persecuted in such a shameful manner. That is the tragic aspect. And I tell you, the people will receive this, and most of them are already knowing the facts. Therefore, they'll react to it, and maybe during the election campaign, these stories are not told by Mian Saab or his daughter again, but their disciples and their followers and their admirers and their voters will continue talking on this, what has happened to their leader.
All
They
right.
shouldn't
Let me come to Asad once again, and I'm sure, Asad, you have a lot to respond to what Farooq earlier also spoke about. And I'd like to ask more with regards to the issue of lifetime disqualification and how, if we're talking about that as being draconian, are we going to proceed forward in terms of the future development and also decisions of the past? But also add to that what we often hear politicians and political leadership talking about with reference to the courts is for them to take suo motu action against anything that they claim is unjust or something that they think needs to have some sort of legal action. That why is the court not taking suo motu action, or this is something that the court should act upon? Can you also clarify for us which political matters or which sort of actions or measures account for such suo motu action to be taken in? When do the court actually go ahead and consider that, and whether or not the injustices that Nawaz Sharif is talking about deem suo motu action by the court?
Well, suo motus are often triggered if there are two elements, if it's a question of public importance and if fundamental rights are being infringed, after which the Supreme Court takes cognizance under Article 184(3), read with Article 187, which is the power to do complete justice. So those are the elements you need to satisfy. As regards lifetime disqualification, I frankly, Sana, don't understand any of the discussion around this aspect. The Chief Justice of Pakistan was the one who authored the 5-member bench judgment, Samiullah Baloch versus Abdul Karim Naushirwani. And if you read the concurrence in that judgment also, the law is fairly plain. Now, we can argue it's draconian, we can argue it's a horrible thing, but it says that a person will be qualified to be a member of the Majlis-e-Shura if he is Sadiq and Amin, unless there is a declaration to the contrary by a court of law. Now, while that declaration remains in field, you will remain inherently unqualified. Now, you can argue that, oh, this is draconian, and you can argue that this is from another realm altogether, and this is not cognizant of my fundamental rights. The strongest argument is that if a person is convicted of a serious offense, he can still contest after 5 years, whereas if a person is held to be morally unfit by the Supreme Court, then he'll be out of political office for his entire life. Again, the onus lies on Parliament. This was a General Zia era amendment, which was for some strange reason, unbeknownst to anyone, I've not been able to get an explanation for this. It was amended in 2010 during the 18th Amendment, where our own parliamentarians inserted the provision, declaration to the contrary by a court of law. So you operationalized Article 62(1)(f), which wasn't there before. During the Zia era, this was considered too ambiguous to actually be used. So post 2010, you had Justice Iftikhar Chaudhary give a series of judgments with his newly amended power through 62(1)(f) to disqualify people for life. And why did you not change 62 and 63? Because the PMLN, in alliance with the Awami National Party, thought that this is going to entrap Pakistan People's Party members. Now, you and I can discuss how draconian it is all day long, but it remains on the legislature to go to Parliament and amend Article 62(1)(f). The law is plain. I've seen all sorts of theories about how it's barbaric and draconian and savage. It's black and white. If the declaration is there, you are not qualified. And if you want to change that, you need to go to the legislature. I don't understand why our parliamentarians are not being more proactive as regards this aspect. I don't understand.
Absolutely. And Rana Sahab, I'd like to bring this to you, because at the end of the day, when we hear these conversations, there's obviously, of course, a lot of fingers that are being pointed out towards the courts. But when we take a look at the laws that are being called problematic, then of course the responsibility is at the hands of the Parliament, and somehow that aspect often goes ignored or is not given due importance, because then that sort of accountability or responsibility comes to the parliamentarians, and somehow it's anything but the parliamentarians that are taking the blame. Why is that?
Yes, Barrister Saab is absolutely correct. The parliamentarians should have taken the initiative. I myself have moved this bill to the Senate, and Senate has sent it to the Committee of Law and Justice, which is under consideration of Law and Justice. One sitting has taken place, the other will be again taking place within a week or so. And we are going to send it back to the Senate. Possibly, it will be passed by the Standing Committee and go to the Senate. And then it will go to the National Assembly. That is there. But simultaneously, you might have observed the public consciousness about the seriousness of the issue. What about he is a barrister himself? What about the petition filed by the Supreme Court Bar Council? What do they say? This limitless disqualification till death is inhuman. This is not correct. This is to be reviewed. So that they have also made a request. The Supreme Court Bar they have made a request to the Honorable Chief Justice, kindly constitute a full court bench. They should hear, they should revisit, they should analyze this. Issues of very crucial national importance are generally taken up by the full court benches. It is not that a bench of 3 judges or full bench take a decision and decide the fate of the leaders of the nation. And you know what, to what extent it has jeopardized the process of development in the country. You derailed the Prime Minister on a frivolous charge, on totally insubstantial charge. And where have you gone now? Your development stopped, reversals.
Right, and
out of sorts to do anything the right correction. So therefore, losses are so much for taking these decisions which are not contributory to the benefit of nation. Therefore, even the honorable courts, I'm sure they are very cautious of these things. They should think 100 times, even if they are angry with somebody, that their judgments will have wide ramifications and repercussions on the fate of the country. As I mentioned about Justice Munir, others.
Absolutely, we're short on time, Rana Sahab. So let me just quickly go to Farooq as well, because I know, Farooq, you're eager to add in something, and you can go ahead, because I know you've also been quite vocal with regards to the role of the parliament and how the political leadership need to be able to use that platform to move further, and somehow, unfortunately, we're not seeing that. Yes, Farooq.
Right. Thank you, Sana. You realize that I actually have been very vocally talking about this. I totally agree with Asad, and I do agree with Rana Saab's bit about the parliament as well. The biggest concern that I have got so far is the way the parliament of Pakistan, and not even just now, right now the numbers are incomplete, so one could say that at this moment it is dysfunctional, but when it was in full swing, when all members sat in it, and I'm talking about 3 terms, the parliament could have done so much to take care of all these lacunae. It did not. Remember that PMLN and People's Party in principle agreed to do away with NAB, and that was in the Charter of Democracy that was signed during General Musharraf's time in 2007. And despite that, both got 5 years in Parliament and in government, but they did not do anything about it. And I totally agree with this as well, that when 18th amendment was being written, while there were some incredibly positive things that happened, Khyber Pakhtunkhwa got its name, and provinces finally managed to do away with concurrent list. But these issues could have been fixed, and unfortunately the way our honorable lawmakers actually approached this matter was astounding. I think Sadiq and Amin is a demand that should not be there in this constitution, because then the source is Holy Prophet, who was the perfect man. I mean, who among us can actually even assume or claim to be even close to what he was? Right? Don't actually raise the bar so high that it becomes impossible to cross. Whosoever actually kept it, of course, you could have actually added something about financial disclosures, financial corruption, and all those things. But abstract words and then adding to it was wrong. And I totally agree with Asad that at that time, I think PMLN was certainly thinking about People's Party. But something very interesting happened, Sana. One of the reasons why NAWAZ Sharif came under so much pressure and fire in the end was also because at that time there was this expectation from perhaps his allies or others in the system that cases should be built against Asif Ali Zardari. And NAWAZ Sharif, in the end at least, refused to play ball. And amazingly, before that, we saw that moment also when he actually donned a coat and went to a court actually in the Memogate case. And then of course we saw this kind of changes as well in the law. I think that PMLN also needs to hold itself accountable. But my biggest concern at this moment is that while I can complain that honorable judiciary did this or did not do that, I don't elect an honorable judge. They are not representative of my vote. It is only Parliament and the elected chief executives who are actually elected through my vote. So I'm going to ask them to take responsibility. I totally agree. But sadly, there are questions that need to be answered regarding past 5-6 years, and we haven't even come close to finding the answers.
Absolutely, that is unfortunate.
Asad, very last question from you. That is related to Fawad Chaudhry termed it as a charge sheet against obviously courts and establishment. Why I say establishment? Because obviously there were the JIT was consisting on the institutions, we know it, and it was a contribution from all of the institutions while investigating this probe. Do you think that he's right about it, number one? And number two, if he's right about it, can we say that at that time, whatever was happening in terms of political victimization, that could have been stopped by PTI, the ruling party, especially by Prime Minister Imran Khan, because he was empowered enough?
Referring to the Panama JIT and now saying that all those institutions are accountable, I don't understand. The JIT report was essentially taken out of evidentiary consideration altogether, and that's what made the entire cases so weak. Rather than a judge simply via a stroke of pen ensuring that all that evidence is re-recorded or resubmitted, you essentially said that this entire report, which it cost so many months and so many institutions, and it took the Supreme Court to say that please form this joint investigation team, you essentially extricated it from the entire process altogether and could not rely on their documents, including those documents from the UAE government, which you had secured via mutual legal assistance, which had said that there were no transactions that the Sharif family had incurred between the Gulf countries to finance their transaction in Qatar. So I don't understand that aspect. As regards the PTI, yes, I completely agree, entirely culpable, and to bang on about accountability all day long takes away from the fact that in the past 3.5 years, the PTI was not able to secure a single conviction at the appellate stage. It was not able to secure any sort of conclusive evidence as regards any of their high-profile political cases. All it ended up doing was imprisoning much of the political opposition and rendering Parliament ineffective. One last aspect, though, the JIT did not come in a vacuum. The Panama proceedings happened because the State Bank, not the State Bank, the FBR, National Accountability Bureau, the FIA, and the SECP were all made completely non-functional. They were staffed with loyalists, and they would come to the Supreme Court again and again and point blank refuse to investigate the Sharif family. Long before the Supreme Court proceedings, this could have been done in Parliament when Ehtizaz Ehsan offered. This could have happened through some sort of judicial commission, which Mia Saab was trying through a retired judge, through Justice Tanveer Ahmed Saab or Justice Tasadduq Jilani Saab. Instead, we saw this 1 year-long carnival in which all our national institutions were saying, we refuse to investigate this person. So I think there needs to be a bit more introspection on this aspect.
Right, Asad, your point is taken.
Yeah, but all of that, Asad, very quickly, one sentence, Sana. All of that actually came from one bunch of stolen facts. We did not know the veracity of all those facts, and somehow our entire legal system was triggered or was moved by that bunch of stolen facts. That was unfortunate.
It is indeed. Thank you very much, Barrister Asad Rahim, Farooq Padafi, and of course Rana Maqbool Ahmed for joining us, and Faraj Faisal for being with me in the studios. That's all that we have from the debate. We'll see you tomorrow.